It was a Tuesday, I think. The kind of gray, unremarkable Tuesday that usually blends into the background of life. I was looking for tax papers, something mundane. Rebecca, my wife, has her own home office. She's a financial advisor, organized, meticulous. Or so I thought. I was rummaging through a filing cabinet, the one marked personal. Because sometimes personal bleeds into taxes in our world. That's when I saw it. A sleek, professional-looking folder, not a tax document, something else. Pearson Trust, it read. Pearson? The name didn't ring any bells. Not immediately. Curiosity, that old betrayer, got the better of me. I pulled it out. Inside, crisp, heavy stock paper detailed a substantial trust fund. My stomach did a slow, cold turn. The beneficiary? Tyler Pearson. Who the hell is Tyler Pearson? I whispered to the empty room. The air seemed to thicken. Then, like a punch to the gut, a memory surfaced. A name Rebecca had mentioned years ago, in passing, a college boyfriend? Mark Pearson. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. This wasn't just a trust fund. It felt like a secret, a hidden life. My mind raced. Rebecca? My Rebecca? The woman I'd built a life with for 15 years? We had Ethan, our son. We had a home, a comfortable life. I own a construction company. I work hard. I'm honest. I thought we were honest with each other. Suddenly, I was back in our early days. Young, full of dreams. We'd sit up late, planning our future. A future that always included kids, a family built on openness, on shared everything. We'd talked about being a team, about navigating life's challenges together. Where did a secret trust fund for an ex's child fit into that picture? My first instinct was to storm downstairs, to demand answers. But a colder, more calculating part of me, the part that assesses a structurally unsound building before deciding on demolition, held me back. I needed more information. I needed to understand the full extent of this before I confronted her. I carefully placed the folder back, exactly as I'd found it. The house, moments before a familiar comfort, now felt alien, layered with secrets I was only beginning to uncover. The hunt for tax papers was forgotten. A different kind of accounting had just begun. The internet is a Pandora's box, isn't it? You type in a name and a whole life can spill out. Mark Pearson. It wasn't hard to find him. Rebecca and Mark, college sweethearts, dated for 3 years, the articles said. Serious stuff, then nothing. A clean break, it seemed, until now. And Mark? He hadn't done too badly for himself, tech entrepreneur. Extremely successful, one glowing profile called him. Figures. My mind kept replaying recent conversations, arguments really, with Rebecca. Ethan, our son, he's 14. Good kid, but school's been a struggle for him lately. He's got this passion, this real talent for art and design. We'd found this amazing private tutoring program specialized, exactly what he needed to build his confidence, to explore what he loves. But Rebecca had been resistant. "David, can we really afford it right now?" she'd said, her brow furrowed with that look of financial prudence I'd always trusted. "Things are a bit tight, maybe next year." Tight? We lived comfortably, more than comfortably. I knew what my company brought in. I knew what she earned. Tight wasn't the word I'd use, but I'd deferred to her judgment. She was the financial advisor, after all. She handled the day-to-day finances, the investments. I trusted her. Now that trust felt like a fragile thing, easily shattered. A secret trust fund for a boy I'd never heard of, while our own son's needs were being questioned, his passions dismissed. The unfairness of it burned in my chest. How could she say we couldn't afford a program for Ethan, a few $1,000s, when she was salting away who knows how much for someone else's child? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. I needed to understand. I needed to know why. Ethan. He's got this way of looking at the world, a little sideways, a little different. He sees things I don't, patterns and colors and shapes. His notebooks are filled with sketches, intricate designs, worlds born from his imagination. School, though, that's a different story. The structure, the rigidity, it just doesn't click for him. His grades have been slipping, and with them his self-esteem. He's started to withdraw, to quieten that vibrant spark he's always had. The art program wasn't just about art. It was about him. It was about showing him that his way of seeing, his talents, had value. It was about giving him a space to succeed, to feel good about himself. But Rebecca, she called his art impractical hobbies. She'd sigh when he'd spend hours drawing, instead of with his nose in a textbook. "He needs to focus on real subjects, David," she'd say. "Things that will get him somewhere." Now her words echoed with a new, jarring resonance. Impractical for Ethan, but apparently perfectly practical to fund the future of a boy named Tyler Pearson, a boy she'd never even deemed important enough to mention to me. A boy who, I was starting to suspect, represented something more to her than just an old friend's son. My protective instincts, always strong for Ethan, flared. He was my son, our son, and he was being shortchanged, not just financially, but emotionally. Rebecca's focus, her concern, it seemed to be directed elsewhere. The contrast was stark, and it was breaking my heart. I saw the trust fund folder in my mind's eye, and then I saw Ethan's hesitant smile when he showed me his latest drawing. The two images warred, and a cold anger began to settle in. The confrontation. I'd replayed it in my head a dozen times, each scenario more disastrous than the last, but I couldn't keep it in any longer. The silence was eating me alive. It was a Thursday evening. Ethan was at a friend's house. The quiet of the house felt heavy, charged. I found Rebecca in the kitchen, making tea, the picture of domestic calm. "Rebecca," I started, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside. "We need to talk." She turned, a small, questioning smile on her face. "About what?" "I was in your office the other day," I said, keeping my tone even. "Looking for tax documents." Her smile faltered, just a little. "And?" "And I found something else, a trust fund, for a Tyler Pearson." The name hung in the air between us. Her face, usually so expressive, became a careful mask. "Oh," she said, her voice a little too bright. "That." "Yes, that," I said, the control I was clinging to starting to fray. "Who is Tyler Pearson, Rebecca? And why are you setting up a trust fund for him?" Her defensiveness was immediate, a wall slamming down. "It's complicated, David." "Complicated?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping me. "I'll say, try me." And then it all came tumbling out. The story of Mark Pearson, her college love, how she'd broken up with him when he was struggling, before he'd made his millions, how she'd reconnected with him years later, sporadically at first, then more frequently. "I felt guilty, David," she said, her eyes pleading for understanding. "I abandoned him when he needed me. This is my way of making amends. He's done so well, and I wanted to do something for his son." Abandoned him? He was a college boyfriend, not a husband. And what about our son? What about the amends she owed him for making him feel like his dreams weren't worth investing in? "So, you've been in contact with Mark all these years?" I asked, the question tasting like ash in my mouth. She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Yes." "And you never thought to mention this to me? Your husband? The father of your child?" "I didn't want to worry you," she said, the excuse so flimsy it was insulting. "It's my money, David, from my bonuses." Her money. As if we weren't a team, a partnership. As if her secrets didn't impact me, didn't impact our family. The betrayal was a sharp physical pain. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the lies, the omissions, the hidden allegiances. My wife, the woman I thought I knew, was a stranger standing before me, offering justifications that felt like further betrayals. The foundation of our marriage, already cracked, was starting to crumble. The next few days were a blur of clipped conversations and a heavy, oppressive silence. I did more digging. The trust fund for Tyler Pearson wasn't some token gesture. It was over $300,000. $300,000. My mind reeled. That was more than a down payment on a house. It was a future, secured. And all the while, Rebecca had been quibbling over $5,000 for Ethan's art program. $5,000 to nurture our own son's talent, to give him a chance to shine. The disparity was sickening. A new, uglier suspicion began to take root. Was this just about guilt? Or was Rebecca still carrying a torch for Mark Pearson? The thought made me feel physically ill. Had our whole marriage been a consolation prize? Then came another revelation, dropped casually by Rebecca as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "Mark and I have been meeting up with Tyler," she said one evening, not even looking at me. "Just for some college planning sessions. Tyler's incredibly bright, you know, top of his class." College planning sessions. With her ex-boyfriend and his son. A son she was showering with financial security while our own son was made to feel like his aspirations were a burden. The sense of betrayal deepened, morphing into a profound feeling of inadequacy. Was I not enough? Was Ethan not enough? It was like she was living a parallel life, a life where I was an inconvenient footnote. The family dinner. Rebecca announced it with a forced cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. "Tyler's going to join us for dinner on Friday. I thought it would be nice for him to meet Ethan. And you, of course, David." Meet Ethan? This stranger, this ghost from her past, was now being invited into our home, into our family circle. Ethan was confused, understandably. "Who's Tyler, Mom?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "He's the son of an old friend of mine, sweetie," Rebecca said, her voice saccharine. "He's a very smart boy. You'll like him." The dinner was excruciating. I watched Rebecca, her every move, her every word. She was different around Tyler, more animated, more engaged. Her praise for him was effusive, her interest in his academic achievements almost maternal. And Ethan? He sat there, quiet and uncomfortable, a shadow at his own dinner table. Tyler, to his credit, seemed just as uncomfortable. He was a polite kid, clearly intelligent, but he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He barely made eye contact, answered questions in monosyllables. I got the distinct impression he was there under duress. After Tyler made his escape, the dam broke. "What was that, Rebecca?" I demanded, the fury I'd been suppressing finally boiling over. "What do you mean?" she asked, feigning innocence. "You know exactly what I mean. The way you were with him. And what about Ethan? Did you even see him sitting there?" "Don't be dramatic, David," she snapped. "I was just being welcoming." "Welcoming? Or were you auditioning for the role of his stepmother?" The words were out before I could stop them. Her face paled. "That's unfair." "Is it?" I shot back. "Because it feels like my son is being compared and found lacking. It feels like my family is being undermined by your what, Rebecca? Your unresolved feelings for a man you left 20 years ago?" The argument raged, a bitter, destructive storm that left us both exhausted and further apart than ever. The priorities were clear, and they weren't mine or Ethan's. It was a few days later, the air in the house still thick with unspoken resentment. Rebecca found me in the study, a look of weary resignation on her face. "David," she began, her voice low. We need to talk. Really talk. I just looked at her, waiting. And then the confession. The words I'd dreaded. The truth I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to face. I do regret it, David, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Leaving Mark. I do. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. He was my first love, she continued, her voice choked with emotion. And when I see him now, so successful, so happy, I can't help but wonder, what if? What if? Those two words, the architects of so much misery. She'd been comparing our life, our messy, imperfect, real life, to a fantasy, a romanticized version of what might have been. And Tyler? I asked, my voice hoarse. What is he in this fantasy of yours? She hesitated. Then the dam truly broke. He's the son I could have had, she sobbed. Smart, driven, focused, everything I thought a son should be. The cruelty of it, the casual dismissal of our own child, stole my breath. And Ethan? I finally managed to say. What about Ethan? Your son? The one you actually have? I love Ethan, she insisted. But her words rang hollow. Of course I love him, but he doesn't apply himself, David. He doesn't try. He's not like Tyler. Not like Tyler. The comparison, so blatant, so unfair, was a knife to my heart. My son, my wonderful, creative, sensitive son, reduced to a disappointment because he didn't fit her idealized mold. Rebecca wasn't just mourning a lost love. She was mourning a lost life. A life she clearly believed would have been superior to the one she had with me. And in her eyes, Ethan was a constant reminder of that perceived failing. The unfairness of it all was a crushing weight. My son deserved better. He deserved a mother who saw him for who he was, not for who he wasn't. The final straw. It wasn't one thing, but a culmination of 1,000 little betrayals, 1,000 paper cuts to the heart of our family. I started looking into our finances more closely. Not just the joint accounts, but everything. And what I found, it was another layer of deceit. Rebecca hadn't just been hiding the trust fund. She'd been hiding the true extent of our financial comfort. We weren't tight on money. We were more than comfortable. We were wealthy. Her claims of needing to be frugal, her questioning of Ethan's expenses, it hadn't been about affordability at all. It had been about her priorities. And Ethan, our son, was not one of them. I tried, one last time, to reason with her, to advocate for Ethan. He needs our support, Rebecca, I pleaded. This art program, it's important to him. It's important for his confidence, for his future. She waved a dismissive hand. He needs to focus on his grades, David. Art isn't going to pay the bills. The callousness of it, the willful blindness to our son's needs, it was a breaking point. Then came the art showcase. Ethan had been working towards it for months. It was a small, local event, but for him, it was huge. He'd poured his heart and soul into his pieces. He was nervous, excited, desperate for our approval, our presence. The same night, Tyler had an academic competition. A prestigious one, Rebecca had made sure to tell me. She'd been planning to attend for weeks. You'll be there for Ethan, won't you? I'd asked her the day before, a knot of dread in my stomach. She'd hesitated. David, Tyler's competition, it's a really big deal for him. Mark will be there. It's important I support them. Support them, not us, not her own son. The evening of the showcase arrived. I stood there, watching Ethan's face light up as people admired his work. He kept glancing towards the door, a hopeful, then increasingly disappointed look in his eyes. Rebecca never showed. She chose Tyler, she chose Mark. She chose her fantasy life over her real one. I drove home from the art show, Ethan quiet beside me, his earlier excitement extinguished. The injustice of it all. The sheer, devastating unfairness to my son solidified into a cold, hard resolve. I couldn't fix Rebecca. I couldn't make her see what she was doing, who she was hurting, but I could protect my son, and I could protect myself. That night, as Ethan slept, I made a decision. A decision that would change everything. I couldn't stay. I wouldn't stay. Not in a marriage built on lies and misplaced loyalties. Not in a home where my son was made to feel second best. It was over. Leaving wasn't an impulse. It was a carefully constructed plan, executed with the precision of a blueprint. My first priority was Ethan. He wouldn't suffer financially because of his mother's choices, because of my decision to leave. I met with a lawyer, a sharp woman named Miss Davies, who specialized in complex family law. We went over everything, meticulously. Assets, accounts, trusts, especially trusts. I made sure Ethan's future was secured, that he would have everything he needed, everything he deserved, more than Rebecca had ever planned for him. The letter to Rebecca was the hardest part. How do you condense 15 years of love, betrayal, and heartbreak into a few pages? I didn't try. I kept it factual, clinical almost. I laid out the reasons, the discoveries, the final, irrevocable breach of trust. I told her I was leaving, that I couldn't continue to live a lie. I told her I would always be there for Ethan, that he was my priority. I packed a few bags, personal belongings, clothes, the essentials. The house, our home, felt like a museum of a life that was no longer mine. Each object, each photograph, was a fresh stab of pain. The emotional weight of it was crushing, but the thought of Ethan, of his quiet disappointment at the art show, spurred me on. Leaving him even temporarily, even in that house with his mother, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I slipped into his room before I left. He was asleep, his face soft and peaceful in the dim light from the hallway. I brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, my heart aching. "I love you, son," I whispered. "Always." Then, I walked out. Out of the house, out of the marriage, out of the life I'd known. I drove to my mother's place. She has a small guest house out back. It wasn't much, but it was a refuge. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the unfamiliar lawn, the reality of what I'd done settled in. I had left my wife. I had left my son, in a way. The path ahead was uncertain, terrifying. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. The fallout was immediate and messy. Rebecca's reaction was a predictable storm of anger, disbelief, and then a strange, wounded confusion. How could I do this to her, to us? She didn't see it, or perhaps refused to see her role in the wreckage. Ethan was devastated. That's the only word for it. His world, already unstable, had been violently upended. The phone calls with him were a torture. His voice, small and scared, asking why. "Is it my fault, Dad?" he'd asked once, and the question nearly broke me. "No, buddy," I'd said, my own voice thick with emotion. "Never your fault. This is about me and your mom. It's not about you. I love you. That will never, ever change." I made sure to see him as much as possible. Picked him up from school, took him out for burgers, just sat with him while he drew. It was a delicate dance, maintaining that connection while navigating the minefield of the separation. Rebecca, meanwhile, was trying to control the narrative. To friends, to family, she painted a picture of a husband who had abandoned her, who had walked out without warning. She conveniently omitted the trust fund, the secret meetings, the emotional affair that had been slowly poisoning our marriage. But Ethan, kids are smart. They see more than we think. He started to piece things together. The hushed, angry phone calls he overheard. The tension that had been simmering in our house for months. He didn't understand all of it, not the adult complexities, But he understood that things were broken, that his mom had played a part in that breaking. The guilt was a constant companion. Had I done the right thing? Was leaving an act of strength or an act of selfishness? Some days, the uncertainty was a heavy cloak, suffocating me. But then I'd see Ethan's face, remember his quiet hurt, and the resolve would harden again. I was doing this for him, as much as for myself. Life settled into a new, uneasy rhythm. The guest house at Mom's became my temporary home. It was small, but it was mine. I saw Ethan regularly. Afternoons at the park, weekends working on small construction projects I'd set up in Mom's garage. Anything to keep our bond strong, to show him he was still my world. The legal proceedings for the separation began. Miss Davies was a rock, calm and methodical amidst the emotional chaos. Letters went back and forth between lawyers. Rebecca's initial anger slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to give way to something else. A dawning awareness, perhaps? A flicker of understanding of the pain she had caused? It was too soon to tell. Mark Pearson, a name that had become a symbol of my marriage's demise, began to distance himself. Whether it was his own conscience or Rebecca finally admitting the extent of the damage, I didn't know. But his presence, which had loomed so large, began to recede. And then something unexpected happened, something I never would have predicted. Tyler and Ethan. They started talking, tentatively at first. It turned out Tyler spent a lot of time at the local library, the same one Ethan frequented to find art books. They'd bumped into each other. Maybe it was shared awkwardness, or maybe it was just two teenagers finding common ground in the wreckage of adult mistakes. They started sketching together, Ethan sharing his design ideas, Tyler, surprisingly, showing an interest. A fragile, tentative friendship began to bloom in the most unlikely of circumstances. It was a small ray of light in a very dark landscape. I knew I had to talk to Mark. Not for Rebecca's sake, but for my own. I needed to understand his role in all of this, his intentions. Was he an innocent bystander, or a willing participant in the unraveling of my family? We met at a neutral coffee shop. He looked ordinary. Not the larger-than-life villain I'd half expected. Just a man, a bit harried, a bit uncomfortable. "David," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, a strange sense of unreality washing over me. "Mark," I replied, "thanks for meeting me." We sat. The silence stretched. "Look," he began, stirring his coffee with unnecessary vigor. I need to be clear. I had no idea about the trust fund. Not until Rebecca mentioned it after you left. And I certainly didn't know she was hiding it from you, or the extent of, well, everything." I watched him, searching his face for any sign of deception. He met my gaze, his eyes holding a surprising sincerity. "Rebecca and we reconnected a few years ago," he continued. "It was nostalgic, I guess. We talked about college, about old times. When she mentioned Tyler and his interest in tech, I offered to help, to mentor him a bit. That's all it was, from my end. College advice. I never intended to cause any problems in your marriage." He paused, then added, "For what it's worth, I told Rebecca she was playing with fire. Meeting up, the college planning. It felt complicated, but she insisted." His words, raw and unvarnished, hit me with the force of a revelation. Rebecca's fantasy, her grand what if, it had been largely one-sided. Mark wasn't pining for a lost love. He was a successful man, living his own life, who had perhaps been flattered by the attentions of an old flame. But he wasn't trying to steal my wife or my life. "She told me she regretted leaving you," I said, the words tasting bitter. Mark sighed, a look of genuine regret on his face. "People say things, David, especially when they're caught up in old emotions. Rebecca, She tends to romanticize the past. I think she was more in love with the idea of what we had, or what she thought we could have had, than with me. He agreed, readily, to step back completely, to give our family space to heal. He seemed genuinely distressed by the chaos his reappearance, however unintentional on his part, had caused. I left that coffee shop with a strange sense of clarity. The anger I'd felt towards Mark began to dissipate. He wasn't the enemy. The real problem, the source of the betrayal, lay much closer to home. Rebecca hadn't just been dishonest with me, she'd been dishonest with herself, chasing a ghost at the expense of her real, tangible family. Ethan, my boy. He was struggling. The tentative friendship with Tyler was a small solace, but the emotional toll of the separation, of his mother's blatant favoritism now laid bare, was immense. His grades plummeted further. The light in his eyes, the one I'd fought so hard to protect, was dimming. He became withdrawn, sullen. My mother, with her quiet wisdom, was the first to say it. David, he needs more than you can give him right now. He needs professional help. It was a hard pill to swallow. As a father, you want to be able to fix everything for your child, but I knew she was right. We found Dr. Carter, a family therapist. Calm, insightful. She created a space where we could all, eventually, begin to speak our truths. The early sessions were brutal. Ethan, quiet at first, finally unleashed his hurt, his confusion, his anger, directed at Rebecca mostly. The words, raw and unfiltered, of a child who felt unseen, unloved for who he was. Why wasn't I good enough, Mom? Why did you always like Tyler better? To her credit, Rebecca sat there and took it. The defensiveness was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified understanding of the depth of the wounds she had inflicted. Seeing Ethan's pain, hearing it in his own words, finally seemed to break through her layers of denial and self-deception. Dr. Carter guided us through the wreckage. She helped Rebecca confront her what-if thinking, her idealization of Mark and Tyler, and the devastating impact it had on her actual son. There were no easy answers, no quick fixes, just a slow, painful excavation of years of resentment and misunderstanding. My own struggle was different. Watching Rebecca begin to crumble, to genuinely recognize her mistakes, stirred a confusing mix of emotions. There was a part of me, the part that had loved her for 15 years, that felt a flicker of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a recognition of her pain, her humanity. The focus in therapy, Dr. Carter gently reminded us, needed to be on Ethan. What was best for him? His well-being was the compass that had to guide us now, not our own bruised egos or shattered dreams. The question of whether our marriage could or even should be salvaged hung in the air, unanswered. Slowly, painstakingly, Rebecca began to change. Or perhaps to chip away at the facade she'd built, revealing the person underneath I'd once known. She started spending real time with Ethan, not just physically present, but emotionally engaged. She asked him about his art, listened to his ideas, attended his school events, even the small ones. She looked at his drawings, really looked at them, and the praise she offered felt genuine, not forced. One evening, during a particularly difficult therapy session, she made an announcement. "I'm dissolving Tyler's trust fund," she said, her voice quiet but firm. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake. The money, it will be put into an educational fund for Ethan, equal to what I'd set aside for Tyler. No, more, whatever he needs. It wasn't just about the money, I knew that. It was a symbolic gesture, a tangible act of reparation. Mark, she told us later, had been fully supportive of this decision, even relieved. He never wanted or expected that kind of financial entanglement. I watched these changes with a cautious, guarded optimism. Was it real? Or was it a performance, a desperate attempt to win me back, to put the family back together? Ethan, though, was responding. The sullenness began to lift. He started talking more, smiling more. He enrolled in a new, more intensive art program with Rebecca's enthusiastic support, and he was flourishing. Seeing him happy, seeing him confident, that was everything. Dr. Carter started to gently nudge Rebecca and me towards individual sessions, and then joint ones without Ethan, to explore what, if anything, was left between us. Forgiveness. It's a complex word. What did it mean? Could I forgive the lies, the betrayal, the years of feeling second best in my own marriage? Could trust, once so thoroughly shattered, ever be rebuilt? I didn't have the answers. I only knew that for Ethan's sake, and perhaps even for my own, I had to be open to the possibility. Months passed, months of therapy, individual and joint, months of careful, tentative steps. Rebecca's efforts were consistent, genuine. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was doing the hard work of introspection, of facing her own demons. The idealization of Mark was gone, replaced by a clear-eyed understanding of her own projections and regrets. Ethan, bless him, was thriving. The cloud that had hung over him for so long had lifted. He was passionate about his art. His grades were improving, and he even started to develop a dry wit, a sign of his growing confidence. He saw the changes in his mother, the effort she was making. One evening, just him and me, he said, "Mom's different now, Dad. Better." Then, with a vulnerability that tugged at my heart, he asked, Do you think you'll ever come home?" His question, so simple, so profound, laid bare the decision that I had been circling for weeks. Could I go back? Did I want to? The separation had changed me, too. I'd found a strength I didn't know I possessed. I'd stood up for my son, for myself. I'd learned to live without Rebecca, to be whole on my own. I realized with a startling clarity that I no longer needed her approval, her validation. The old dynamic, where I was constantly seeking her reassurance, was broken, and that was a good thing. If I went back, it would have to be different. Not a return to the old patterns, but the creation of something new. Something built on honesty, transparency, and a mutual respect that had been so painfully absent. Dr. Carter put it plainly. "David, the decision is yours. There are no guarantees. Rebuilding trust is a long, arduous process, but Rebecca is showing a commitment to change. The question is, are you willing to take that leap of faith for yourself and for Ethan?" I thought about my early dreams with Rebecca, the life we'd planned. It hadn't turned out that way, but maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to build something else. Something perhaps not as naive, but more resilient, more real. I decided to try, not with a grand romantic gesture, but with a quiet conversation, full of caveats and conditions, clear boundaries. That was the non-negotiable starting point. "Rebecca," I said, sitting across from her in Dr. Carter's office, a space that had become strangely familiar, almost safe. "I'm willing to try again, to come home, but things have to be different, radically different." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and solemn understanding. "I know, David. Whatever it takes." We agreed to restructure everything, finances first and foremost, complete transparency, joint accounts for household expenses, separate personal accounts for discretionary spending, but full visibility for both of us. All investments, all financial decisions made together. No more secrets. An educational fund for Ethan was formally established, robust and secure. His future, his passions, would never again be subject to his mother's whims or her comparisons to another child. The trust between us, that was the hardest part. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like painstakingly rebuilding a shattered vase, piece by tiny piece. There were days when old doubts would surface, when a careless word or a perceived slight would send me spiraling back into suspicion. But we talked about it. We brought it to therapy. We learned to communicate in a way we never had before, with a raw honesty that was sometimes painful, but always necessary. The guest house at Mom's remained empty for a while. I moved back into the family home, but into the spare bedroom. It was a symbolic step, a recognition that we couldn't just pick up where we left off. We were starting over from a place of brokenness, but also from a place of hope. Our family, we all knew, would never be the same. The cracks would always be there, a reminder of the pain we had endured. But maybe, just maybe, those cracks, filled with the hard-won gold of honesty and forgiveness, could make us stronger. It was a new beginning, tentative, fragile, but a beginning nonetheless. 1 year? It feels like a lifetime ago. And yet, like yesterday. Ethan is in his element. His art program is everything we'd hoped for, and more. He's confident, articulate, his creativity blossoming under the unwavering support of both Rebecca and me. His room is a chaotic, wonderful mess of sketches, paints, and half-finished projects. His laughter fills the house again, a sound I'd desperately missed. Rebecca, she's different. The change is real, it's lasting. Her boundaries with Mark are firm, respectful. They communicate occasionally about Tyler, but the emotional charge is gone. Tyler, who is now thriving at a top university, still maintains his quiet friendship with Ethan. They connect over shared interests, a strange, unexpected brotherhood forged in the crucible of our family's crisis. Our relationship, Rebecca's and mine, is a work in progress. Still, we're more honest, more vulnerable with each other than we've ever been. The romance isn't the giddy, youthful kind we started with, but something deeper, more grounded. It's a conscious choice every day to trust, to communicate, to forgive, both each other and ourselves. Family therapy continues, less frequently now, more of a check-in, a safe space to navigate the ongoing complexities of our new normal. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I reflect on the journey, the betrayal, the anger, the heartbreak, the painful decision to leave. And I realize, with a certainty that settles deep in my bones, that sometimes you have to walk away. Sometimes leaving is the only way to find your way back, not to what was, but to what can be. Sometimes you have to dismantle everything before you can rebuild something stronger, truer, and ultimately more loving.